What's up guys, my name is Ace, and ever since Warzone came out, the two most common weapon combinations that you would tend to run into in Warzone for people that are actually trying to be as successful as possible is going to be an assault rifle combined with an SMG, or an assault rifle combined with a sniper rifle. However, with Season 2, there's been a lot of talk about a potential double AR meta where you want to use one assault rifle for long range and another assault rifle for your close range engagements instead of an SMG. So in today's video, I wanted to take a deep look at this to see if this is really a viable or good choice if you're trying to be as effective as possible in Warzone's current state. Are you actually better off using a close range assault rifle compared to an SMG right now? Let's find out. So what I did here is I took one of my favorite SMGs to use right now in Warzone, that's the Bullfrog, and this is the setup that I'm using for the sake of this comparison. Of course, you could make adjustments to this if you wanted to for your own personal preference and everything, but this is a setup that I currently like running on a Bullfrog. And then I wanted to compare this to what I consider to be one of the best close range setups for an assault rifle build in Warzone's current state, and this is with the XM4. Again, you could make a few adjustments here or there. This is what I've sort of come up with as far as making a good XM4 that's just designed for close ranges. This isn't designed to be used at long range at all. And these are the two setups that I'm going to be comparing today. Of course, there are other great options for a close range assault rifle like the Cold War AK-47. That's a great close range assault rifle as well. But just to keep things relatively simple for this comparison, we're just going to compare the XM4 with the Bullfrog. And let's just hop into the comparison of some of the more important stats for close range combat. The first stat we're going to look at, and one of the most important, is our time to kill against 3 armor plates in the maximum damage range of the gun, which the Bullfrog is a little bit faster than the XM4, but they're pretty comparable in this area. Next, I also wanted to mention headshots. With just one headshot, you can reduce your time to kill with the Bullfrog, whereas with the XM4, it takes 2 headshots mixed in with body shots to reduce that time to kill. And even if you do that, the Bullfrog is still killing faster with its 1 headshot mixed in with body shots. Now, as for our range value, this is where the assault rifle will have a clear advantage over SMGs. The Bullfrog actually has a decent range for an SMG in this game at 14 meters, but the XM4 beats it at 21 meters. As for our aim down sight time, no surprise here, the Bullfrog wins in this area. However, with the way that I've built the XM4 since I kitted it for close range, we don't get a bad aim down sight time at 267 milliseconds. It's very usable in close quarters. And then finally, for this stat page at least, our sprint out time is way faster with the Bullfrog compared to the XM4. But again, just like with the aim down sight time, the sprint out time really isn't bad on the XM4. This is still a very usable sprint out time for close range encounters, but you will have an advantage with the Bullfrog. And when it comes to this section here, it really goes to show that if a Bullfrog user and an XM4 user run into each other at the exact same time and react at the same time, not only will the Bullfrog get on target faster because of its aim down sight time, also it will come out of sprint faster, assuming you are sprinting. You're also going to be killing a little bit faster than the XM4. However, it just doesn't quite have the same range potential. Anything within 14 meters though, the Bullfrog will beat the XM4. Now, another important stat when it comes to a secondary weapon is how long does it take to swap from your primary assault rifle to this secondary weapon? Because if you're in a stress situation and an enemy is pushing you, you've got to get your close range gun up as fast as possible so you can compete properly with them up close. And it turns out with the amped perk, which most people are running, if we're swapping from a long range M4 build, the Bullfrog will be ready to use in 501 milliseconds, whereas the XM4 is surprisingly just 534 milliseconds. I honestly thought there was going to be a bigger discrepancy here, but again, it's a little bit slower than the Bullfrog, and all of these areas where the Bullfrog is just slightly better, it really adds up over time. It's actually the same story if we're looking at just putting one armor plate in. If we're in a close range fight, oftentimes you only have time to pop one single armor plate in, and again, I did test this with the amped perk since most people will be using that. And while it's pretty comparable, you can get that armor plate in about 100 milliseconds faster with a Bullfrog compared to if you've got an XM4 in your hand, which in some stress situations can make the difference in a gunfight. Moving on, another pretty important stat for close range engagements is your hipfire spread, because many times in close quarters, your best option is going to be to just hipfire at your enemy. And it's no surprise here, our minimum hip spread while standing is going to be noticeably better on the Bullfrog compared to the XM4. But it doesn't look like too much of a difference here. However, we really start to notice this when you're moving at full speed, which you're often going to be doing while hip firing. And you can see our maximum hip spread while standing and moving is way better on the Bullfrog compared to the XM4. You're simply going to be much more effective hip firing with the Bullfrog than you would with the XM4. Next up, I wanted to take a look at movement speeds, and movement speeds can be important in fights, but also just for getting around the map quickly. Typically, if you've got a long-range assault rifle build, you're not really building that for movement speed, and therefore, if you're trying to travel a long distance on foot, you'll typically be swapping to whatever your close-range secondary is to move from point A to point B a little bit faster. So our base movement speed is a little bit better with the Bullfrog compared to the XM4, which is no surprise. And we see a really similar story with our sprint movement speed. The Bullfrog is a bit better than the XM4, but there's not a huge difference here. Honestly, you could go either way and you're still going to get a solid sprint movement speed. So I wouldn't really say it's a huge downside to be using the XM4 in this case, but technically speaking, you are better off with the Bullfrog. And you're probably noticing this trend throughout this video, that the Bullfrog is just better at almost everything when we're talking about a closer range gun. However, that's about to be turned on its head. Let's have a look at our aim down sight movement speed. Keeping in mind, all of these stats are with the attachments I mentioned earlier. So we're using the skeletal stock on the Bullfrog and the Raider pad on the XM4. And you can see here, we actually strafe while aiming down sight faster with an XM4, which can make you a harder target to hit when you're in a gunfight. Strafing back and forth can be really effective for throwing someone off target because you can be quite hard to track with a fast aim down sight movement speed. More importantly though, our aim down sight movement speed while firing the weapon, this is basically the entire reason that the double AR meta was suggested in the first place, because we get a massive boost to our aim walking movement speed while firing when we're using the XM4 with the Raider pad, whereas with the Bullfrog, we actually slow down when we fire our gun while we're aiming down sight. And the best way to illustrate why this is such an important stat to be looking at for gunfights is to just show you what it looks like from the enemy's perspective if you're strafing back and forth while firing your gun. Right here, we can see with my Bullfrog setup, I'm strafing back and forth a decent amount, and there's some movement there, but really, most players aren't going to have too much of a difficult time tracking you as you're strafing back and forth. They're going to be able to keep up with you just fine. Now let's have a look at my XM4 build, and this is way harder to track, especially in an online environment. The average player is going to have a very difficult time tracking you back and forth here and hitting consistent shots on you. And this is where you actually gain quite a big advantage using a Cold War assault rifle combined with the final stock attachment that you unlock. And it's just way better than any of the SMGs out there. And this really is all it's cracked up to be. This is the type of thing that will literally win you gunfights that you otherwise wouldn't have won. And as a result, just because of that one attachment, I would say it is actually quite viable to run a dual AR setup. I still think there are a ton of advantages to using SMGs though, and one advantage that I haven't even mentioned yet is fairly obvious. And this is, if you're using a double AR setup, you're using the same ammo pool for your primary as well as your secondary weapon, so you're a lot more likely to run out of ammo, and you have to really make sure you're paying attention and make sure that you're picking up ammo. Every time you kill an enemy player, for instance, you want to make sure you're looting that player, whereas if you're using an assault rifle and an SMG, they use different ammo types and are pulling from different ammo pools, and that means you're much less likely to run out of ammo completely. You may run out of ammo in one gun, but at least you've got the other gun that will have its own separate ammo pool. Now, having said all of this, yesterday, Raven did tease a future update that's going to be coming. I don't know exactly when this is coming, but they are going to be making changes to the aim down sight firing speed with Cold War attachments, and this is most likely going to be a significant nerf to the Raider pad on the Cold War assault rifles. And therefore, assuming they do nerf that properly, once that nerf hits, it's probably going to be in your best interest to sticking to SMGs for close quarters. Until then, I would say you can go either way, use whatever you feel comfortable with, but a double AR setup is definitely viable for now at least. Of course, that is just my opinion on this. I'd like to know in the comment section below, after seeing all of these comparisons here, do you think it's a good idea to run a double AR setup? Or do you think it's still a better bet to be using an SMG combined with a long-range assault rifle? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.